I'm interested in digging deeper into the telephony contract for which SSC was the primary signatory. In 2015, the contract was signed at a cost of $50 million over 10 years, but now a decade later, it has been tagged at $190 million, with an additional $24 million to be added through 2027. Mr. Jones, as President of Shared Services Canada, when you or your predecessor as President of SSC became aware of the massive contract increases through the 18 contract amendments, what would be the process for informing and or receiving approval from the Minister, please?
Well, thank you for the question. I think this actually gives an opportunity to clarify. So when the contract was competed, the Government of Canada put a number of very specific custom requirements, for example, building infrastructure, data centers, etc. So the $50 million that was talked about was never the base of the contract and the total cost. It was the minimum revenue that the company needed to make the investments. And so the contract value in 2017 was given to one of my predecessors, and it was $190 million, and that's what we expected, and that's where we're running at today. The additional money that's being asked is to extend the service beyond what its planned life was. There is a termination date of the contract, and was just extended beyond that. But in general, the way this happened is when we put a contract in place, it goes to the market. We put our requirements out there. A number of bidders came in. Because of the requirement, they will come in and they will say, this is what needs to be done. This was not the government buying equipment to put in our data centers, so we don't pay an upfront hardware cost. They spread that over the life of the contract. But I don't know if either of my colleagues would like to provide more detail.
That's fine, Mr. Jones. Thank you very much. I guess what I'm really trying to get to the core of here is a contract which is more than quadrupled in size, cost Canadians hundreds of millions of dollars, and according to the Auditor General's report, hasn't met CRA's objectives, received scrutiny and final approval from who, please?
So the authorities that were granted were actually up to $300 million for this contract. Of which we are currently planning on the $190 million. That was the projection in 2017. The $50 million was the investment, the minimum revenue that the vendor needed to recoup for their physical investment. So that was in the original submission, and it is on track for the original contract submission.
Thank you. It does unnerve me a little bit that you do talk about how the $300 million, when it's not utilized, I don't think we can make light of an expenditure of $190 million, especially where there were so many significant 18 specifically contract amendments. The Auditor General spoke to cases where system outages impacted callers and that the contract signed by SSC didn't even consider whether performance penalties would apply to IBM. Why would that be?
Well, we're waiting.
That's actually one of the most important lessons learned. Because the government put in unique requirements, it meant that the standard commercial clauses were not what was being measured. So we put in unique measures for things, and it made it very difficult to hold the vendor to account. I can tell you that the vendor took those very seriously to respond to the performance issues at the beginning of the contract. But because of the way we learned a hard lesson on this, to put in commercial standard terms and conditions that you can hold vendors to account, not government-specific terms and conditions or government-specific requirements, which makes it very hard to hold them to account because it muddies their waters. And that's actually one of the biggest lessons that was applied in that not only the subsequent contact center contracts, but also many of our other contracts where we use standard terms and conditions that are used in the commercial world so we can compare apples to apples.
And I appreciate that. As my next question was going to be, IBM ensured that guarantees were built into the contract. It's why the contract, as you have indicated, was signed with a minimum work guarantee of $50 million. And did you not think it would be wise to include assurance measures within this contract? Did your agency expect the contract to rise above $50 million over the 10-year period?
Yes.
If so, by how much?
In 2017, the projection was that the contract that was given to one of my predecessors, the contract would be a total of $190 million over the course of its life. And it is right on track for $190 million. That was in 2017. And in 2025, we're at that moment. What is now the growth is an extension of that contract to give time to migrate to the new contact center solution.
Can you provide to the committee the documents behind that, please, Mr. Jones?
We can.
Thank you. Your organizational structure denotes a chief audit and evaluation executive. However, the Auditor General found limited validation of vendor invoices by both Shared Services Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency. The report also states, when asked, neither Shared Services Canada nor the Canada Revenue Agency could confirm whether the invoice levels of activity, which were the basis for charges, were accurate. What is the purpose of a specific audit and evaluation executive if contracts and expenses aren't being properly evaluated?
Perhaps I can turn to Scott Davis to talk about the work that was done. Our audit and evaluation, my audit and evaluation, Chief Audit and Evaluation Executive needs to cover the entire organization and is complementary to the work of the Auditor General, but it's for the internal management of the organization. What we do is we actually have in our Chief Financial Officer branch, we go through and verify, and maybe Scott can provide some details.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, this audit focused on the service by Canadians, by the CRA. I look very forward to the Auditor General coming back and doing the investigation that has been highlighted, because as you referred to as those 18 amendments, within them there was over 150 service orders, which are our control points, and we received a full consolidated invoice, and we used a splitting tool between CRA and the other departments that are on this solution, and that's how we did our validation. So the validation that was verified was at the CRA level, but I'm looking forward to working with the OAG and our internal audit team to actually provide that transparency to this committee and to Canadians.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.